Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shakayla. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. Thank you to those who are joining us in person and to those watching online as well. So this year marks the 10-year anniversary of Zero Fatalities, which, if you didn't know, it's a program designed to save lives on Nevada's roadways. So it is really a pleasure to introduce our speaker for this program. Andrew Bennett is the Public Information Officer for the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety. We've worked together in the past, and he truly is one of the biggest proponents for safe driving in this entire country. So please welcome our friend, Andrew Bennett.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much to the Mob Museum. It's a privilege to be back here today. As she said, my name is Andrew Bennett. I have the privilege of serving this state in two different roles. The first one is in the Office of Traffic Safety, which is a division of the Nevada Department of Public Safety. Public Safety is a conglomerate of state police agencies, the Nevada Highway Patrol, Parole and Probation, the Fire Marshal, and I have the privilege of working in the Office of Traffic Safety, where we have an extremely dedicated small group of folks that just go to work every single day to try to prevent fatal car crashes from happening. And the goal of today's presentation is to talk a little bit about what we're seeing, what we have seen, and then what we're doing to eliminate those fatalities and some of the different initiatives that we've taken over the last few months to really solidify our goal of zero fatalities here in our state. So our mission statement at the Office of Traffic Safety is to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities so everyone arrives home safely. And it's that idea of everyone, that idea of perfection, why our goal in the state of Nevada has for the last 10 years been zero fatalities. The new addition to the Zero Fatalities program is we actually, for the first time in the history of the state, set a date for when we hope to reach zero fatalities, and that is the year 2050. There's a national push. There's 38 states that have a zero-based goal here in the United States. The zero-based goal started in Sweden and kind of went to Switzerland and some of the Nordic countries, and then made its way over here. New York was the first state to adopt a zero-based program. And so why we chose 2050 is, and we'll talk a little bit about the data, we have fluctuated. The highest years we've ever seen were about 2006. We were experiencing about 450 fatalities annually. In 2009, we had the most recent low, which was in the low 200s. And then right now we're averaging around 350. And then we'll kind of walk through that in detail. But the meeting that we had about picking 2050 was rather comical. There's a lot of folks that work in traffic safety across a variety of different professions. And a few of them only have, 2, 4, 5 years left in traffic safety. I'm just getting started. I plan on being around in 2050 to see this goal through of zero fatalities. But it is sometimes discouraging. We have our public information officer from NHP in here as well, and he just told me that we're working a fatality right now with a motorcyclist. And so unfortunately, the first thing I have to do every single day is I start the day by reading the fatality reports from the night before all across our state. So whether it's in Elko, Reno, Vegas, or anywhere in between. And unfortunately, Mondays are the worst because it's, the last 3 nights of the weekend. And this weekend was no exception. We've had at least 4 that I'm aware of statewide with fatalities. And so throughout this presentation, there's a sense of urgency in our voice. And why we have to have that is because unfortunately every 15 minutes, someone's killed across the country in a car crash. It's the #1 leading cause of death for anybody the age of year from 4 to 44. One of the words that you're going to not hear me say today is accident. We strongly believe that there is no such thing as an accident. It's a crash or it's an incident, and it's actually in Nevada law that we have to refer to it as such. All too often we read headlines of mother of 3 killed in a drunk driving accident. That's not accidental. Someone chose to drive impaired. Someone chose to get behind the wheel. And the words that we choose to use, they're important. And again, that sense of urgency should be evident. All too often we see examples just like this. These are the minor, if I were to use accident, this is where it might apply. But again, someone chose to take the shortcut, speed, do something a little different than everybody else. And this is what leads to crashes. And the severity depends on speed and a variety of factors. The Nevada Highway Patrol and Las Vegas Metro did an enforcement down in Primm 2 weekends ago, and I don't know if anybody saw that on the news. And they pulled over 178 drivers going back to California that were driving in the shoulder. That's extremely reckless, that's extremely dangerous, and I wish we had the manpower to do that every single weekend. Because that is a prime example of, someone might have the intention just to, simply get around and cheat the system, but that can lead into, if someone has a flat tire on the side of the road, you don't need someone driving 81 miles an hour on the freeway, or have a Lamborghini go through the dirt like we did who was DUI. These are all things that are 100% preventable, and that's why they're not accidents. Again, going with the why they aren't accident, we can look at all the fatalities that we have, and we can pinpoint them, and I will in a slide that's a little bit later. We have 13 behaviors that account for 94% of the crashes, and all of them are choices for the most part. And, traffic safety, just like anything else, also relates very heavily to public health related issues. We're facing addiction issues that are leading to, people choosing to drive impaired because they feel like they have no choice. But this is the single reason why we believe that we can get to zero fatalities, is because if we eliminate the choices and implement technologies, we might be able to get there. So what we saw in 2020, as we all said, was a year that we didn't expect to have. We should have had very, very few fatalities, but unfortunately in 2020, when our streets were nearly empty, we had an increase in fatalities. This was not unique to Nevada. Across the country, states saw this trend happening. So again, we had a 3% year-over-year increase in traffic fatalities, which resulted in 314 fatalities on Nevada's roadways. And this is one of the questions we often get. Pre-pandemic, we were the fastest growing state in our union, and so folks asked if that was what was contributing to the rise in fatalities. It never has really, been the determining factor. The economy has a lot to do with where fatalities are. But again, we'll talk about what we saw in 2020, and again, some of these decisions that were being made. So in 2020, if I had to, focus on three behaviors that we saw, it was these three. It was speed, it was impairment, and it was lack of seatbelt usage. We went dark. Nevada pretty much closed down April 13th, 15th area. Our traffic safety office, we went dark on our messaging to be able to allow the state to focus on, the epidemic that was coming up. So we went dark with our messaging for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, this is a few of the examples that we saw. And this is just a brief clip to be able to try to encompass it a little bit.
This morning, a growing risk on the road. More Americans finding the need for speed. With far less traffic since stay-at-home orders, highways that used to be jam-packed now look like racetracks.
We have that new warning about danger on the road during the pandemic, as some police departments report a surge in reckless driving on empty roads.
Now, Nevada Department of Public Safety also tells us that so far this summer is deadlier than this time last year on our roads.
Deadly crashes in the valley are going up. There were 4 different fatal crashes in the valley over the last 2 days. You can see the aftermath there on your screen.
Add high speeds, reckless driving to a densely populated area like Las Vegas, this is the result you get.
Witnesses say the person behind the wheel hit a pickup truck while driving recklessly. This follows a tragic trend NHP troopers say has spiked since the start of the pandemic.
And everyone was really adhering to that strict stay-at-home order. And I know the roads were empty. And highway patrol agencies all over the country were seeing the speeds increase. Well, now we're still seeing these high speeds, but look at all the cars on the road.
And so just to give an example of what we were seeing, our troopers across the state, this is a prime example. For anybody not familiar, that's a radar unit. The highway patrol has front and rear radar, so they can get people coming up on them or trying to pass them. You can see the speeds, 140, 120, 114, 112, and everything in between. This hasn't stopped, unfortunately. This was during the peak pandemic months of early March, and all the way through the first 6 months. But just this last weekend, we had folks stopped on St. Rose and 15 going plus of 120. There was 4 examples just in one evening of 4 individuals going over 120 miles an hour. And speed is extremely deadly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. This next example, in the state of Nevada, we have a legal limit of 0.08 for alcohol in your system. This is something where this is a roadside test. You know, it's the breathalyzer basically. The top right example was just outside of this museum here on like about 3rd and Ogden-ish. And that's almost like that's 4 times legal limit at least. And these are the people that you're sharing the roads with. And so we were really surprised to see such a dramatic increase in DUIs during the pandemic. We expected to see, there's usually a correlation with the amount of vehicle traffic. You know, if we see more vehicles on the roadway, fatals go up. If we see less, fatals go down. The pandemic will be studied for years and years as in traffic safety because of how, you know, dramatic of an increase that we saw in fatalities. And there is no portable roadside test for marijuana or other drugs, but we did see a rather dramatic, sharp increase in all. And then finally, to spare, you know, the most graphic photos we have, the lack of seatbelt usage that we saw is extremely disheartening. In the state of Nevada, we have a proven seatbelt usage rate of 91% of road users wear their seatbelt. We're the next data point, which is we can't correlate or understand really, is out of the vehicle occupants. So if you were to take away pedestrians, motorcyclists, cyclists, so just people in the car, 50% in 2020 of the people that died in a car crash did not have their seatbelt on. 50%. So to go back a few slides here, we have speed is 33% of our fatal crashes. Impairment is involved in 52% of our fatal crashes. And occupants are unrestrained 50% of the time. If we could get a handle just on these 3 behaviors, we'd be below 100 tomorrow with our fatality count. So where we're at so far this year in 2021, it's May 2nd, and we're at 101 fatalities. This will be 102 by the end of the day, which is an 8% increase from a 3% increase. So, you know, we, in 2019 compared to 2018, we had a 7% decrease. And we really expected to continue that trend through 2020, but now we're 11% in the wrong direction. And I've included the pedestrian fatalities, and I'll talk about pedestrians a little more in detail. We're one of the few states that 30% of our roadway fatalities are vulnerable road users. So again, the motorcyclists, pedestrians, cyclists, moped riders. And that's truly unacceptable. We've had years within the last 20 years where we maybe total had 16 pedestrian fatalities. We've had, unfortunately, I think it was 2015, we had 101 pedestrian fatalities in our state. And there's a lot of things that people think, you know, especially, is anybody not from Vegas in here or lives in Vegas? Are we all locals? So it's one where people always ask me, or when I tell them I'm in charge of traffic safety in the great state of Nevada, or specifically in Las Vegas, where I'm based out of, they often ask me, you know, is it a tourist problem? It's absolutely not a tourist problem. We might have, you know, 3 to 4 fatalities on the Las Vegas Boulevard or here in downtown annually, but we all know the roads they happen on if you live here. It's, you know, Boulder Highway, Flamingo, Maryland, Tropicana, you know, these are local roadways, the 15, 215. So these are the 13 behaviors that we do focus on. When I started on Zero Fatalities as an unpaid outreach intern in 2011, we had 5 behaviors, and we've slowly added a few, and we've grouped them into a few different areas. Break the rules and touch the mic. We have changed it a little bit with, up until this year, speed was not a primary focus for our office. Speed is a behavior people choose to speed. You know, the speed limit in the state of Nevada is what's posted. There's no such thing as give or take 5 miles an hour. At the end of the day, you know, 1 mile over 66 and a 65 is illegal in the state. And currently it's still a criminal misdemeanor. That will be changed this legislative session, most likely. That'll be downgraded to a civil infraction, along with all traffic-related behaviors except for reckless driving and DUI. Lane departures is going to be distracted driving. We're not going to talk too much about distracted driving today because unfortunately our data is severely lacking in the area. We can only attribute 8 fatalities to distracted driving annually over the last 5 years. Unfortunately, it's the number one thing people don't admit to. Very rarely, you know, is there warrants and investigative process if it's a single vehicle crash. If it's not prosecutable, you know, the warrants aren't there. And so lane departures and distracted driving, we all know it's an issue. We all know that it causes minor and maybe even severe car injuries, but it's not necessarily a leading cause of fatalities, but we have to talk about it. Red lights is one of my biggest pet peeves living in Las Vegas. You know, I think we all know that you can't go on green if you're the first car. You got to wait about 3 seconds for the, you know, 3 or 4 people that are going to run the red light in front of you. And we do see about 25% of our fatalities happen at a controlled intersection. Work zone safety, this is one that was a priority for us, especially over this last year. We've had 10 fatalities in one work zone alone, going up to Reno at Scotty's Junction. One of them was a triple fatal. You often see these horrific, you know, multiple fatality incidents happen where, you know, a lot of them have been attributed to other things on this board, but they happen to happen in a work zone. We talked about the vulnerable road users category, and where some of these numbers get complicated. One of the worst fatalities, I think the folks from NHP in the room would agree, that we've ever had to talk about was the fatal ×5 that we had out in Searchlight with the cyclists. That's very difficult for us to place in one category. That was a proven impaired driver who failed to yield to cyclists. And we often see these multiple behaviors in the crashes, and what the most harmful action in that event was him driving impaired. And so that it'll be always listed as an impaired driving fatality that involved cyclists. Micromobility is a new one that we've had to focus on. That's a lot of the bike share that we don't necessarily see here yet with the bike share and the scooter share. Reno and Vegas have tried it a little bit, especially right before the pandemic, and then it kind of died off during the pandemic. But that is increasing because the more micromobility sharing that you have, the less people that are wearing helmets, because a helmet doesn't come with that rental. Occupant protection we've talked about with the lack of seatbelt usage. Older drivers is a new one this year. That was important for us to add. Disproportionately, so just to talk about the driving population, yes, there's more people 65 plus than there are 15 to 21. The category, the young driver category, 15 to 21, they represent 5% of the motoring public. They cause 10% of the crashes, so that is disproportionate from the population to the amount of crashes that they're causing. 65 plus represent about 22, 23% of the motoring public, and they're causing 45 to 50% of the crashes. And so older drivers was a priority for us. And some of the solutions aren't very popular. It would be retraining for older drivers, making sure that they had to go to the DMV more often. And all of these have a task force in our state. We have a great relationship with all of our partners that I'll talk about here in a second. Young drivers I talked about, and Narcissa's here, our teen driving coordinator for the great state. She focuses on, in Southern Nevada, 15 to 21-year-olds. If we start the education system correctly, we hope that to have success as we move forward. And most schools, I think we're down to 8 schools in Southern Nevada have driver's ed in the school. And a lot of it's been privatized and eliminated from the education setting. And we have to correct that because there's a lot of confusion with what are the laws with the permit process. And before I worked in traffic safety, I coached band. And the amount of times that I would have parents come up to me and tell me that their teens told them that wasn't the law anymore is really unacceptable. We need to make sure that everybody knows what the laws are. Even though there's quite a few, distracted driving is actually listed on here twice. Lane departures could be attributed to drowsy driving as well. And then we talked about impaired driving. So one of the reoccurring themes that we have in traffic safety is accountability, responsibility, and respect for life. This is how we start to frame the conversation. There's a few different ways of approaching our public service announcements that we'll talk about in a second. Nobody likes to see a TV commercial that's about death and destruction. And so we have to rotate how we talk about our messaging. And so we usually bounce between comedy, data-driven, and drama. And currently we're kind of in a comedy phase. But it's a very serious topic to talk about, and sometimes it's hard for us to find that appropriate messaging. But where this comes down to, and there's several cases that are ongoing that I can't talk about, but there were very high-profile cases down here. One of them was in the southwest part of town in Mountain's Edge. And the victims' families being drugged through quite a lot of conversations in the court. And it's unfortunate. It shouldn't be happening, because at the end of the day, people need to have accountability, understand the responsibility when they get behind the wheel, and have respect for life. And so this is a recurring theme that you might hear from me as we continue on. But at the end of the day, these three principles go into everything that we talk about. Sometimes when we hear folks talk about the pedestrian fatalities, and they almost talk to, it's almost less of a life because it was a pedestrian, is just mind-boggling to us. Every life matters that's on our roadways and that we're trying to keep safe. It's one of my favorite things about my job. I'm not going to work every single day. Our troopers aren't going to work every single day. Everybody in the realm of traffic safety goes to work to make sure not only our family and our loved ones get home safely, but every single person gets home safely at the end of the day. So 6 C's of traffic safety, and I'm going to spend a little time on this one. This is how we approach and in what order we approach traffic safety. When I started in traffic safety, we had 3. It was education, engineering, and enforcement. EMS was then added, and then this year, everyone and equity was added. So what does equity look like in traffic safety? This all applies as we go down the list. Each one of them has an equity problem. Number 1 with engineering. Again, being locals, I should be able to use this example. If you were to start Eastern, driving on Eastern in Sun City, Anthem, and Henderson, and take Eastern all the way up to North Las Vegas, you're going to see 4 very unique road designs. City of Henderson does a pretty good job with their roads. They have sidewalks, they have lit crosswalks. You go into the county and, crosswalk might be a little further to, find. You get back into the city of Las Vegas. They do an incredible job, just like they did with the Main Street project just across the street. And then you get into North Las Vegas, and again, it's kind of, you're looking for those crosswalks again. So traffic safety engineering is absolutely an equity issue that we're trying to address first, because we believe if the roadways are designed safely and the proper infrastructure is there, we can get all of these after the fact. But we have to start with success. Another example is, again, that drive up to Reno. There's no reason that road should be 2 lanes in each direction. It's heavily traveled. It's dangerous to pass on that road. These are all examples of equity that we need to find in making sure that the engineering is proper. Equity in education, this is one that I'm guilty of. As the person responsible for our traffic safety messaging, we don't do a good job of making sure that everybody's able to be reached by that messaging. All too often, it's easy to put up a billboard or put out a social media post, and we're not representing our entire diversity of our state. And so that's important for us to make sure that we fix our education, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Equity enforcement, that's a big conversation, a big topic right now. At the end of the day, our office was the one that proposed automated traffic enforcement last legislative session. It didn't even get a vote. It's extremely unpopular here in our state, but at the end of the day, if we're trying to eliminate interaction with law enforcement through traffic enforcement, that should be back up on the conversation. But at the end of the day, a camera can't take a drunk driver off the road. So there's always going to be that human interaction that is needed, and law enforcement's always going to be needed in traffic safety. But making sure that we have those proper conversations of, if we're putting resources in the correct place, we need to make sure that it's in high crash causing locations. And that's where everybody comes together through our data team, our engineering team, and we all come together to make sure that we have the proper resources in the right place. EMS, a lot of folks don't think about doctors being a key part in traffic safety, but they're literally our last line of defense. As many of us should know, UMC is the only Trauma 1 center in the state of Nevada. If something serious happens to you in Reno or in Elko, you're either going to Salt Lake or Sacramento. And that's an equity issue. If something happens, God forbid something happens to you in Tonopah or in the middle of nowhere, the access to healthcare is absolutely a traffic safety issue, and that's where we're trying to address that a little bit as well. And having quality access to healthcare is a vital public safety interest in more ways than one. And then finally is everyone. Going back to accountability, responsibility, and respect for life, this is a key point with everybody. The most dangerous thing you're going to do every single day is get behind the wheel, walk on your own 2 feet, get on 2 wheels, or drive 18 wheels. And that shouldn't be the case. Traveling should not be the most dangerous thing that you do every single day. It should be, you should have a guarantee safety that we can't provide right now. And so this is how we, across the board, this is our team. I'm lucky just to be the most conspicuous member of our team, but it's a very deep field that works in traffic safety, and a lot of these people you might not think of. We spent this week, we were talking to the head of trauma at UNLV and at UMC, and how passionate she is about eliminating traffic fatalities and traffic injuries, because it's the #1 thing that UMC treats at trauma is car crashes. And again, if we can free up that resources, we can have better health care for all of our other issues. And that's what was so disappointing to us when we did see that increase during the pandemic. We needed those hospital beds. We needed those available resources. And so to see how people were choosing to be reckless behind the wheel was unacceptable, and we tried the best we can to curb it. So our approach that we've taken with the renewed push for zero fatalities by 2050 can be defined by these 3. Doubling down on program efforts. This is one where we know what works. There's traffic safety is extremely well studied. We have research and we have data more than we know what to do with. And there's a book called the Countermeasures That Work, and it's rather thick. It's pretty dull, but it's any program that's ever been tried in a state. If it's been proven to be successful, it's in this book. And so we know what works, we know what funding we have, and those are the choices that we have to make during grant season like we're in right now, is we partner with over 200 different projects every year in our office to provide grant funding to be able to put these community programs in place, whether it's enforcement, education, engineering, or anything in between. And so doubling down on what we know, is the program efforts. Prioritizing safety of everyone. Again, this is an equity issue that we have historically seen. That make it, not just, City of Henderson, folks pay taxes there, but we need to make sure that our entire valley and our entire state are safe. And especially like Boulder Highway was a great example. Boulder Highway is owned by every jurisdiction in southern Nevada. Part of it's Henderson, part of it's the DOT, part of it's the state of Las Vegas, part of it's North Las Vegas. And it finally took the state saying we need to fix this about 5 years ago, or 6 or 7 years ago now. And it used to be it was in the top 10 deadliest stretch of roadway in America, Boulder Highway was, for pedestrians. The governor at the time said, hey, we're gonna set aside extra money. We all need to get together and fix this once. The problem is not fixed. We still experience about 7 to 10 pedestrian fatalities annually just on Boulder Highway, but that number used to be 30 annually. And so it's been dramatically decreased by a rather small investment. It was $10 million annually for 3 years. So it was a $30 million project to fix Boulder Highway, or to help Boulder Highway with pedestrian safety. And so again, it's using that data and making sure that we're putting the money in the right place. And then leveraging technology. This one I'll spend a few seconds on. Everybody believes that we might reach zero fatalities because the cars are gonna be driving themselves by 2050. I can tell you that's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen by 2050. Not everybody's gonna be driving a self-driving car. I think more people are gonna be passionate about their car than a few other of their rights. I want to drive for the rest of my life. I like driving, it's a good time. But it's gonna take an incredible amount of government control to make sure that we get towards that by 2050, and I don't see that happening. Number 2 is a prime example. We had an incident when we were doing the PRIM enforcement just the other weekend. A car came up to a Metro officer and a trooper and said, hey, that person's sleeping. They're driving while sleeping. And of course, they were driving a specific brand of car that is well known for driving itself. And the gal was literally passed out behind the wheel and the car was driving itself. And we can't allow that to happen yet. And so these are all things that we're looking at where, yes, technology can be put into place. With like red light cameras, going back to automated traffic enforcement, it's proven that an intersection that has a red light camera, it'll reduce fatalities by at least 35%. One of the arguments that we hear, though, is that it'll increase minor crashes by about 16%. Our cold answer is, I don't care with about the 16%. My goal is to make sure we all arrive home safely at the end of the day and alive. It is proven that people slam on their brakes more when they know it's going to be enforced. but we have to have that certain level of accountability, and accountability is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources out there to be able to enforce every intersection. We all know how bad Decatur and Sahara is and how many people run that red light, whether it's the left turn or the right turn. And these are all prime examples where, a simple technology improvement there could probably make the difference in making sure that we don't have the 8 fatalities that we do annually at that intersection because people run that red light. A red light's not going to stop someone from running the red light, but it's going to make them think about it. One of my favorite stories about red light cameras, I was in Miami, actually Fort Lauderdale, and I got in on a red eye at like 3 in the morning. The taxi driver ran every red light except for one. And I wasn't comfortable with him running red lights, but I asked, out of curiosity, you just blew 13 red lights, why'd you stop at this one? He goes, it's the only one with a camera. And so, there are certain things that we got to work on with how we implement the program, and there's a lot of public distrust about automated traffic enforcement. But if you have a chance to read the bill that was proposed 2 years ago by our office, it was how to properly install and manage that program. So moving on to education, I'm not going to dive deep into all 6 E's now. I'm just going to talk about mostly education and how that plays a role. The Zero Fatalities program has been our state's traffic safety program for the last decade. We get the message out there in any way we can. One of the most unique things I've ever got to do, being responsible for our statewide program, I do have all of our corners in Nevada and everything in between, was my team sent me to Elko right before the pandemic. It was January of 2020. And I was expecting to go in there with presentations and PowerPoints and, give the good word of traffic safety. And I quickly found myself in people's living rooms talking about traffic safety, one person at a time, because that's just how it was set up. And it's these conversations that have to be ongoing. Our goal through all of these different mechanisms that we have is to create the conversation about traffic safety. Traffic safety is something that's often not talked about. Unless I'm at the dinner table, I'll make every conversation about traffic safety if I can. But at the end of the day, it's something that's not discussed unless it affects your family, and that's not our goal. We don't want you to find out what it's like to get that knock on the door from one of our law enforcement partners. It's 100% preventable, and that's why we do what we do. Our social media, there was a great hearing that we had for our budget, and we had a legislator tell us that we're not reaching Californians on our Twitter, which is true. They're not following us, and nor should they, necessarily have to. But we use a combination of approach to make sure that we're trying to reach the people. A great example is we're going into a impairment period in between June and July this year. And we're focusing on alcohol and marijuana. Marijuana is an extremely difficult topic for us because we can't spend federal funding on it right now. It has to be state funding, and we don't have a lot of state funding. And so what we're doing is we're targeting every single dispensary with a geo zone, and you'll get pushed a safe driving ad because people don't know what the laws are when it comes to marijuana impaired driving. There's a lot of misconception about how long it stays in your system. We have a legal limit currently that'll probably be replaced here shortly. But we have a legal limit just like we do with alcohol, and it's active impairment substances in your body. It's not the metabolites that could be there for 30, 60 days. It's an active level. We also want to make sure that when we do research and surveys, we want to make sure that we're reaching the appropriate audience. And so we conduct an annual awareness survey. We interview 1,000 Nevadans annually to see what their attitudes are about traffic safety, their knowledge of the laws, what they think about zero fatalities. And so currently, about 50% of Nevadans have either heard or know what the Zero Fatalities program is. That number has gone down slightly just because we are a very transient state. A lot of people think it's a metro program. I don't care who owns it as long as they associate traffic safety with it. But it is one with those surveys, we find out interesting things. Like a great example is 80% of Nevadans know that we have a move over law for cyclists. Then we ask them how many people actually do it, and it's about in the 60%. So they know that we have the law, but 20% less will actually practice and follow that law. One of the classes that we do all the time is a program called Drive. And if you receive a moving violation and you're under the age of 18, you have to go spend about 3 hours with a trooper. It's basically driver's ed regurgitated. And the amount of times that we'll hear people say, like, I don't know why I got pulled over because I was going with the flow of traffic, or I was only going 5 miles over, or whatever it is. There's a lot of education that we simply have to continue to do about what the law is. Does anybody want to guess real quickly how many traffic laws we have in the state of Nevada? Throw out a number. 200? Okay, we have 443 traffic laws here in the state of Nevada. A lot of those are repetitive, so like speed is graduated, so it's 1 to 10, 10 to, over the, so speed takes up quite a bit, and then especially when you're talking about like in a school zone, that's all a separate law. But we have 443 traffic laws, and a lot of them don't change, and they haven't changed for, like, we've had laws on the books since like 1840 in this state, and they really haven't changed. Like a prime example is our murder law, which we could spend 2 hours on, which is fascinating. And we actually tried convicting people that were involved in fatal car crashes with murder. And we successfully got the conviction 8 times with a jury. It got overturned by the Supreme Court, not because it was a misappropriation of the law. We just have a law in place, and you can't pick and choose what law, if everybody has to be charged at that correct level. But it was something like that law hadn't been changed in so long, and there's a provision that talks about a cruel and abandoned heart. And when you talk about accountability, responsibility, and respect for life, having a cruel and abandoned heart, we were able to articulate that 8 different times with a jury, and they successfully charged 8 different people with murder. And some of these examples, like one of them that will always stick with me was Levi Ichenike. He was a little 8-year-old boy on his way to school in his parents' car, and someone was going 123 miles an hour on Tropicana, ran 8 consecutive red lights and killed this little boy. That's a clear demonstration of a cruel and abandoned heart. And unfortunately, our laws currently, if you're impaired and you kill somebody and it's proven, you're looking at 8 to 20. You're going to serve about 6, which I think a lot of families would agree that's not justice, but it's the current law that we have in place. And then with murder, it actually started at 20, and I think it made a few different people think about their choices behind the wheel. Grassroots, again, we'll talk to anybody about traffic safety if we can, whether it's First Friday or, at a Cinco de Mayo event, whatever it is. We want to make sure that people have, it's amazing, even like when I'm shopping at Trader Joe's on my own time, the amount of people that will recognize me from the news and come up and ask me about what the law actually is. We want to have those conversations, and that's our whole goal of this program. And again, speaking engagements just like this one, it's a privilege to be back here at the Mob Museum. And then strategic partnerships. This is one that I want to spend a little bit of time on. There's a lot of states that will spend $10 million on sports marketing just for traffic safety behaviors. And you see a lot of it in like Florida and in the South. Sports marketing is extremely difficult to understand. There's a lot going on. If you go to a hockey game, there's a lot of different advertising opportunities that are in there. And one of the ways that we partnered with the Golden Knights the first 2 years that they were here was we saw an 18% increase in DUIs and DUI-related fatalities on the Knights of Nights games. And with that information, we were able to partner with them and try to have that conversation about just because A is in play, B happened, and the only difference was the Knights came to town. And these are all conversations through our data folks and our PR team and everybody that we have to be able to approach in a sensible way. And another prime example was the marijuana industry. I've never seen an industry that was so willing to partner with us before and put up signage and make sure that they want to make sure, just like the bars. Our bar and taverns in Las Vegas and across the state are willing to partner with us with whatever we want to do, because they want to make sure that their consumers are safe and they're able to come back and enjoy themselves at a later date. And we were able to have that pretty positive conversations with the marijuana industry and the cannabis industry in the very beginning. The number on the right is a little low. I've done 1,800 interviews just in the last 4 years about traffic safety with our local media. And each one of these is, our goal is to be able to tell a story that we find interesting and to be able to captivate people's attention. You see all too often on the nightly news, it'll start and end with usually a car crash fatality because it is, it's extremely violent, it's on TV, there's a visual. And our goal is to be able to, again, shape that narrative. And a prime example is with the number of wrong way crashes that we've had over the last 3 years. We saw this, what was deemed to be a spike in wrong way crashes. 90%, 90 to 100% of wrong way crashes are impairment related. 90 to 100%. It's not road design. It's not, people from the UK coming to Vegas. It's impairment. And our goal in our office and with our partners is to make sure that we're able to shape that narrative and bring it back to the actual problem. If we could eliminate impaired driving today, we would have less than 150 impaired or overall fatalities annually and it shouldn't be that hard to accomplish. We've done 40 PSA campaigns in the last 10 years on Zero Fatalities. Some of them I love, some of them I'm embarrassed about, but it was important for us to be able to get out that message in a little bit different way. There's some really impactful ones that we've done, like we did a campaign called Don't Kill a Dream. That was about 4 years ago now that I'm very, very proud of. We have a campaign right now called Save Yourself that I'm proud of. And again, it's just that different way of having that conversation and understanding what goes into these. We did a campaign about 6-7 years ago now called Epidemic, spelled EPED, talking about the epidemic of pedestrian fatalities that we're having. And as someone that's been on over 1,500 fatality scenes, one of the things that will always stick with me and the folks that work our fatalities at any department is the shoes that are left behind when it's a pedestrian fatality. And we did a whole campaign about that. And again, that's just a different perspective that we try to approach in traffic safety. The Save Yourself campaign, we started on New Year's and we're running through the end of July, covering a variety of different behaviors. It is important. This was a conversation that we've avoided for many years. We try not to put the onus on the individuals to literally save themselves. The system, which is everything I've spent the last 40 minutes talking about, should be in place for your safety. But at the end of the day, there is a level of personal responsibility that has to be in play when we're talking about saving yourself. And pedestrian fatalities is a prime example. We not only have an impaired driving program, we have an impaired pedestrian problem. 60% of the pedestrian fatalities that we have are the pedestrian is legally intoxicated. And then we get into the conversation, well, do you want someone to drive impaired or walk impaired? Have a sober friend. Make sure you can get you home safely at the end of the day, because it's one where I don't want to make that decision for anybody. We don't want to make the bars that decision. A lot of the bars were telling us that is, like, at the end of the day, what do you want? And responsibility is what I want, but it'll be a while. So again, we cover a variety of different behaviors. We did a campaign at the last quarter of last year. We deemed the year the worst year ever. That was pretty catchy. We got a lot of traction on that. It was the first time that we've covered multiple behaviors at one time. All of these, so distraction, intersection, pedestrian, we ran from January through March. We're currently in motorcycle, and then we pick up impairment in June and July. It's the first time that we're doing a campaign for impairment outside of the holidays. Real quickly to talk about enforcement. I don't have any slides because I took a lot of these out, but it was one where we have one team in Las Vegas called the DUI Strike Team. It's 10 officers. Their only job is to focus on impaired driving related crimes. There's 10 officers, 7 days a week. They've just surpassed they just had 3,000 arrests since their inception of October 2018. And that's truly unacceptable. I'm proud of the team for able to provide that service to our state and our city. There shouldn't be that many impaired driving folks out there. And just unfortunately, like last night, they got 8. There was only 3 cars out there with the DUI strike team, and they got 8 DUI arrests in just a matter of 8 hours. So enforcement's always going to be important. Again, we would like to see some technology put into play for us to help that be more efficient. But it is one where, folks don't know it's illegal for the state to have speed cameras here, and that's why we don't have them. It's in the Nevada Constitution why we're not allowed to have them. And then finally, is everyone, one of the most common questions I get is, what as an average citizen can I do to help reduce fatalities? It starts and ends with the easy thing is don't do all the things I just talked about. Slow down, buckle up, always drive sober. Those are the things that we need everybody to do, and we'll make some progress in the space. But the number one thing that we need people to be passionate about traffic safety. We need advocates in traffic safety. There's only so much that I can say and do as a state employee. We need the people to be passionate about traffic safety in our state. It should be unacceptable that we're losing over 300 people a year, and 30% of those being pedestrians. We need those passionate voices that are not just mine. And that is what we're looking for with everybody, and how we can get folks to do that. Just kidding, I have a partnership slide. Lyft is an incredible partner of ours. It is a struggle right now with rideshare. There aren't as many drivers available right now, but the single largest investment that Lyft makes in traffic safety is with the state of Nevada. We get more money from Lyft than California, New York, and Florida combined, because we want to make sure that people we live in the greatest city in the world, we live in the greatest state in our union. We want people to have a great time. We want them to enjoy themselves. We're just asking that at the end of the day, you have a sober designated driver at the end of the day, and the easiest way is through rideshare. So we encourage any safe ride home, and Lyft, we're able to give out dozens and thousands of free rides, and we're very, very proud of that program. So here's what everybody can do before we get into questions. We want you to get involved. Know your local legislators, know your local politicians. We want you to be involved in the process. Take note of where these crashes are happening, because I guarantee you, everybody from Vegas in this room, there's been a fatal crash within 2 miles of your home and probably multiple of them. Know where those dangerous roads are, demand changes. I like to believe that we go to work every single day to try to make that difference, but your eyes are extremely valuable to us. A prime example was there was a new interchange that was added on the 15. I won't say what city it was in, but it was, interchange was added on the 15. Within 2 days of that interchange being there, I had 6 emails from the public telling me that the signs were wrong. And instead of saying yield on left on a flashing yellow, it said turn left on a flashing yellow. And there's a big difference, and it was causing crashes. It was 6 citizens that told us that we need to look at that. We only see so much. That's where we need the public's input. Share your story. Unfortunately, way too many people know what it's like to receive that knock on the door or be told that their loved one's not going to make it home that evening. And stories are powerful, and anytime that we have the opportunity to share those personal stories and to share some of the incredible people that I've had the opportunity to meet through this job, that's valuable to us. And provide input. This is something where, if it was up to me, every intersection would be a roundabout, but people don't like roundabouts. It's the safest way to get through an interchange, just people need to know how to use them. But we want to hear what you think as well. And I hope that you guys take the opportunity to ask some questions here this afternoon. And then, if you're a business or you're a nonprofit, we would love to partner with you. We partner with pretty much everybody that we have the opportunity. And how you can do all of these is through our website at zerofataliesnv.com. Our social media is listed below. And people think I'm completely nuts on this last slide. That's important too. But that is my personal cell phone number. I answer that 24/7. Only twice in my career has someone called me with an actual complaint or something that needed to be addressed. I answer that email, I answer that phone number all the time, because if you want to provide input, share your thoughts, share your story, and you don't want to do it through the website, please just text me, call me. I promise you I will answer. This slide, this is very important. One of my favorite things I've ever heard in this job is there needs to be a hotline to report impaired drivers. It's really easy to remember. It's 3 numbers. It's 911. If you believe that you're behind an impaired driver in the state of Nevada, call 911. If you're on the freeway, call star NHP. That's star 647. You'll go straight to NHP's dispatch, but don't waste your time with 311. If it's something that's going to ultimately take someone's life, call 911. Resources will be sent to be able to address it. That's my contact info. Thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you. Is there anyone here in the courtroom who has any questions first? And can you just come up right up here to the mic, please? Thank you. I'm sorry to make you do some work.
My question is, what if you think a traffic signal should be on a particular corner? Because we grow so fast, and before you know it, you have a concentration of people, because where I live, there's a corner that I think they need a light. So I was just wondering, what can one do?
Absolutely, and this is one where, to quote my father, this is my favorite quote that my dad's ever told me. He goes, "It sounds like all you do is talk a lot and take credit for other people's work as the spokesperson for our office." But one of the things I'm very, very proud of that we do, we can't, the state is not going to install that light, but what we can do is we can help support your argument and point you in the right direction of who to talk to. We'll provide you crash data, we'll provide you citation data, and we'll give you the actual point of contact. All too often in government, people get bounced around because they don't know who to talk to. If it's a traffic safety thing, start with us, and we'll get you in the right direction.
Great question. Are there any others in here? I did want to mention a few people commented online. So one person, and you mentioned this before, Andrew, about marijuana. The person said, so marijuana is legal. What does that scale look like?
So there's going to be a few-part question or answer, so hold on for a second. Technically, in the state of Nevada, you are allowed 2 nanograms of THC. Is anybody a phlebotomist in here or a statistician? It's very hard to explain what that level is. It's very, very low. It's the lowest in the country. Currently, there's 3 ways to prosecute a DUI in the state of Nevada. Number 1 is what's called per se. That's Latin for just because. Just because you're at that level or above that level, you're going to get the DUI. There is potential legislation that will eliminate that number. So the second and third way to prosecute a DUI will come into play. It will be, if you fail the roadside test, you're going to get the DUI, and it's going to be up to the officer and the prosecution and the defense to be able to articulate that in court one way or the other. But there is a level. It is not true that if I were to consume cannabis right now, which I'm not going to, but if I were, it's not true that I would get a DUI 30 days later. It would be based, as someone who's never done marijuana, but it would be 30 minutes to maybe 6 hours at the most that you might get that DUI, currently with the level that's in play, but it depends on the body type, the level of consumption, the frequency of consumption. So it's very, very difficult, but we're going to simplify it with possible legislation of if you fail the tests, it's a DUI.
And then the other question was, so the Nevada legislature is currently happening right now. What are some bills that your office is pursuing that may be passed in June?
So there's only one bill that we proposed. It was with the Nevada Department of Transportation. It was to create a full-time committee, the Nevada Executive Committee on Traffic Safety, with having legislators be a part of that so we can continue the conversations. Not to bore anybody with a civics lesson, but we are a part of the executive branch, and we try not to interfere. We don't interfere with the legislative process. We will provide education. We don't provide advocacy at the session. If someone's looking for data, we like to be able to provide that to them. But at the end of the day, there's several large bills that will impact traffic safety, going from moving criminal violations. All of those 448 laws are criminal. Moving that to civil will have some impact on traffic safety. Removing the nanogram level for DUI, that's currently being discussed. There's one bill out there that's talking about quota with law enforcement officers with tickets. There's no such thing as a quota in any respectable department, but we're all for that. There shouldn't be a quota on traffic tickets. There's a few involving HOV lanes. HOV lanes are not a moving violation. That's a crash-causing violation, so that's going to have no impact on traffic safety. But I would say the civil versus criminal and the DUI bills are going to be what's important that comes out of this session.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
Perfect. So I'll repeat the question just so everybody online hears. The question was about light timing, and this is probably going to be an unpopular answer, kind of how the question was framed. We're very lucky in Southern Nevada that we have the RTC runs the lights for all the municipalities. And it's dramatically improving slowly, but there is an improvement, and yes, that would help. The problem is, there's not going to be much sympathy from myself or my office with the gunning it at a red light. Poor engineering is not an excuse. It's a factor. But at the end of the day, we do need people to follow the green, yellow, and red and what each one of those means. With the standardization of, for example, with why this coordination is important, if you lived in any other city where you had a county, multiple municipalities, if this system wasn't in place, that jump, if you were to drive, again, like on Boulder Highway being a prime example, it'd be up to 4 different agencies to time their lights. It's up to 1. They're doing a really, really great job at trying to standardize that and use new technology. We talked about using that technology. There's some great, there's 2 intersections that are currently being piloted that has resulted in like a 63% reduction in wait time. It's just expensive, but they're always looking at things to try to improve that a little bit. So yes, it will help, but again, we hope that at the end of the day, people choose to make sure they stop on red.
All right, thank you all for coming to the Mob Museum today and watching this presentation. We really, really appreciate it, and especially thank you to Mr. Andrew Bennett with the Office of Traffic Safety for the important work that you continue to do in our community. So thank you.
Thank you.